Well, welcome back, folks. This is the first of a two-part series where I'm going to be talking through the work that I've been doing to repair and restore some of the various sub-assembly components for the Honda SL125. And I'm doing this while the chrome is out being redone. I did send the chrome out to the same chrome shop I used for the Yamaha YL1 exhaust system. I sent the wheels out first, they went out about 2 weeks before the balance of the chrome. I just wasn't able to find NOS wheels or good quality used wheels that I thought were suitable for this project. So the wheels went out first, and then I had some repair and organization to do with the balance of the chrome, and that went out 2 weeks later. As of this video recording, I'm expecting the wheels will probably be back in the next 10 days to 2 weeks or so, and then I can go ahead and get started on lacing and getting the wheels back together so I can get those on the bike. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, I'll get the rest of the chrome and we can go ahead and proceed with the reassembly of the project. But this two-part series is really going into more detail on the various components that are waiting to go back on the bike. So without further ado, and there's no particular order, by the way, to this video or the next two videos. They were shot over a period of probably 3 or 4 weeks. They were not shot all at the same time, and I basically just stitched them together here to make a little montage of the various pieces I've been working on, so you can see how they turned out, some of my thinking that went in behind preparing these parts. So again, without further ado, here you can see the refinished black, high gloss black parts that go on the SL125. These are technically not painted, they've been powder coated. And I finished them a couple of days ago. It took me a long, full day to complete all of these. I probably have 8 or 9 hours worth of time into getting them recoated. There are a few pieces that are missing. The foot peg bar, that's really due to an oversight on my part. As I was finishing up these parts, it dawned on me I was missing the foot peg bar. Then I remembered that I had left it in the parts cleaning tank some weeks ago to soak because the bottom was all grungy and greasy and oily, and I wanted to get all that off. I think most of you probably know what I'm talking about, and I'd simply forgotten about it. As it turned out, it really didn't make any difference because as I was finishing these parts, I was just about out of high gloss powder, so I had to order powder anyway to complete the bar, and I don't have that yet, so it'll be probably a couple of business days before I get the new powder in, and I can complete the recoating of the bar itself. However, I'm probably going to delay that process because I want to mount the foot peg bar, or at least do a test fit on the bottom of the frame and engine to make sure it's not bent. Pretty common on this style foot peg bar. That's the kind that goes along the bottom from side to side and mounts up underneath either to the engine or the frame. In this case, it mounts to the frame. They get bent from kids riding these bikes off-road, and the pounding of the weight, of slamming over bumps and whoop-de-doos and those kind of things. They'll quite often get bent out of shape, or they'll hit something. And I have not done a test fit yet, and I can't do a test fit because the bike is not up on its wheels yet. It's on a jack stand right now, and it'll be at least a few weeks before I can get the bike up on its wheels. It might even be a month or more before I get the wheels done as of this recording to do a test fit. So the foot peg bar will have to be done at another time. I do want to talk in more detail about the seat pan right here. That is the one we talked about in some detail. That's the second replacement seat pan for this project. And then the side stand right here that I'd like to talk about as well. We'll take those two items up to the bench and we'll go through those in a bit more detail. The third item that's missing is the bracket that holds the ignition switch onto the frame or mounts to the frame. The reason that's missing is it's mounted on a bike already with the ignition switch, and we'll talk about that another time. And of course the exhaust system is not shown. I didn't powder coat that. We also touched on that earlier. I will have to effect some repairs on the exhaust system, and that will be a flat black paint rather than a high gloss like you see here. and probably will be painted with either a spray can or from a spray gun. Probably be a number of months because I'll have to paint that likely outside, and now we're going into the winter and I can't paint outside anymore, so we'll have to come back to the exhaust system at another time quite a bit later on. Meantime, let's get the seat pan and the side stand up on a bench, and we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. A couple things I want to share with you regarding the seat pan. The first is it turned out, I think, very, very good, as you can see here, I think. Look at both sides. And you can see a little bit of the pitting in the metal. There's really nothing you can do about that short of filling it, which I'm not going to do. But, and this is, of course, the bottom that faces the bike. The other thing I want to point out, there were a couple of little stress cracks once I got this cleaned up. Got all the original paint off, and most of the paint was still on this side. The other side had a lot of rust that had removed the paint, but there was two little stress cracks, one here and a longer one here that I discovered. That's not unusual. That's caused by, you know, where these brackets fit right here. This is the opposite side, and the pounding that those sections take right here when people ride these bikes off-road, it's very typical to run into stress cracks in these thin metal pans. And so I inspected for that specifically on this pan before I did anything further after stripping it. And sure enough, there was a crack here and a smaller one here. So what I did is I just cleaned them up good, and I ran a bead of weld here. You know, a couple little tacks here. I didn't really grind them off much. Those are pretty much as you could, they're just painted over. Because I didn't want to remove most of the weld. I wanted to leave the strength of the weld, because this is quite thin metal. I think it's around 16 gauge maybe or so. So I didn't really grind them smooth. It's not necessary because when it's mounted on a bike you won't see it anyway. So I fixed those, and obviously I derusted it. It was bead blasted or media blasted, soaked 24 hours in evaporust. That's to get the rust out of these pores. And then I media blasted it once again, washed it in a tub of acetone before I powder coated it. And all the tabs all the way around here for securing the seat cover are all intact. None of them were lost in the process or got broke or damaged or rust. Quite often they'll rust right away. And then when you try to bend it a little bit to get the cover out from underneath it, they'll break off. But I'm quite happy the way this turned out. Let's go on and talk about what I wanted to talk about regarding this side stand is that the bottom here, of course it mounts on a bike, you know, something like that. The bottom here was almost wore through to the point that the stem or the bottom of this post right here, you could see right through the steel. And I think when this was originally made, this bottom plate was butted up against the bottom of the stem here, and then it was welded around here. You can, I think, just see those welds. In any event, this was so worn that you could see the bottom of the post itself. This was getting very thin. Again, it's not uncommon. I had a similar situation on the Suzuki TS185 I restored a few years ago. What I ended up doing is taking a piece of steel. I have a scrap bin of steel, and I found, again, I think it was probably 16 gauge steel, 14 gauge, something like that, in a scrap box, cut it to size, cut it to the shape of the original pad, and then formed it so that it fit, and it had the same kind of contours. And then I welded it all the way around the edges here, and then just cleaned up those welds a little bit so they had blended in real nice and smooth. And basically I put a new sole on the bottom of this pad here, or this side stand. And you can see there, I think, what it kind of looks like. And then when I powder coated, of course, I did not powder coat the inside here where this fits up over into the, actually it fits onto the foot peg bar. There's a tab that's welded onto the hole in it. And powder coat is relatively thick, and if I had powder coated the inside of that, it probably wouldn't have slid over the foot peg bar mount, and I would have had to try to grind all that off or remove it. So what I do instead is I mask it off with a high temperature masking tape. It's a silicone type of masking tape that's designed specifically for powder coating. It can take very high heat. So I masked that off before it was powder coated and then just peel it off, just like any masking tape when I'm done. So that's really it for the powder coat. Again, I got to do this foot peg bar yet, and you'll see the ignition switch mount when we get around to talking about it. And here's the ignition switch. Again, just as a reminder, this project did not come with an ignition switch. I had to buy one off of eBay, so I went shopping. Well, this is probably a month or more, even 5-6 weeks ago, and took my time and found this very nice used switch on eBay. I did test it, and it does work correctly. And I cleaned it all up. This trim ring that I'm taking off right now, I just threw in a polisher for 24 hours or so just to brighten it up. The rest of this was just cleaned, including the wiring. I did wipe everything down thoroughly. I pulled this boot back and made sure it was clean underneath there. It was very pristine underneath the boot. So this switch was never used, I don't think, off-road. You can see right there the little red and black marks I'm pointing to. I did touch those up. They were still visible as I received the switch, but I just touched them up with some fresh paint to brighten them up a little bit. I did need to order 2 new keys. It did come with a key here somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. I'll find this for you. This is the original key it came with, which is an odd, seems to be an odd key. I'm not familiar with a key that looks like that. But nonetheless, these are the right keys here, numbers that match the key number on the lock. I threw these in a polisher also for a couple days to brighten them up because they're just a little dingy from sitting around for 50 odd years. And that works as one would expect. Like I said, I did test it and it does work. Here's the bracket. This is a bracket that was on the bike. Again, the bike had the bracket but not the switch itself. And you can see it's been powder coated. And now we'll be mounting this on the bike here shortly. I probably won't show that, but I will certainly show it as a finished assembly when it's mounted on the bike. So that's the ignition lock. Again, it wasn't hard to find. I don't know if I said, but I think I paid, I think I put that on backwards. I think I paid around 25 or so US dollars for this switch, which is pretty much typical. They ranged in price anywhere from like 15, 20 US dollars to $50. So, but this is about the best one I could find. And it'll be a great addition to the bike. So we'll go ahead and get that mounted, and we'll eventually show that in place. I thought I would discuss a little bit the replating. This is all zinc plating that I've been doing in between other activities on the Honda SL125. I set up the plating system and just let it run while I'm working on other things. These are mostly specialty items. That is, they're not nuts, bolts, and screws and washers, which I've shared with you before. I don't usually put the time into replating common hardware that is still available from the manufacturer, especially if it's reasonably priced. And most of the time, those basic hardware items like bolts and screws are still available at a decent price. So I just buy new, usually. There might be exceptions from time to time, but usually I'll just buy those. But these, generally speaking, are not available any longer from Honda. There are a couple of exceptions. The chain adjusters right here, you can still get those new. and some of the hardware associated with the rear brake rod, the spring, the barrel, and a nut. I think those are still available. I'm pretty sure of it. The rod itself is not. All the rest of these pieces are not available. So let's talk a little bit about these. Rear axle right here with the bushing and the nut, original to the bike. Front axle, bushing, and nut. Talked about the chain adjusters. This is the rear brake pedal spindle with the washer that goes with it. Hub, this goes with, I think it's a rear hub if I recall, with the snap ring. That snap ring and this piece, these two go together. This is a rectifier mount. This is an exception. I did replate the original bolt and washer that came with it. You can still get those from Honda, those two little pieces, but I didn't bother. I just replated it. The horn mount, for mounting the horn to the frame, this is under the steering head. We'll talk about the horn at another time in more detail. And of course the rear sprocket. The brake rod here, I had to straighten. It had a little bit of a kink in it, but it did straighten out okay, and I did replate that. I had to be a little creative in how I went about that, and I ended up using a piece of PVC pipe that I cut a channel in, or a notch in, and then suspended this in the solution to be able to plate it. The sprocket, this was the original sprocket that came off the bike. I don't think this is probably original. I really don't know. It's the right tooth count. It's in very good shape. You can see there's no hooking. Often as these start to wear, they'll develop a hook in the teeth. I did look at buying a new sprocket. They're reasonably, or I should say relatively expensive. And all I found were black. So I'd have to remove the finish to get it back to the original plated look. And the look of them wasn't quite right. These windows here, these cutouts, I believe match pretty closely the original sprocket on this bike, at least from what I can tell by looking at old pictures and photos. The new versions of these, even though they would probably fit, have just a series of drilled holes all the way around, so that it didn't quite look right to me. And since this was in good reusable condition, I just replated it, and I think it came out looking pretty good. Most of these parts were then thrown in the polisher, with the exception, of course, of the brake rod. These two axles, the front and rear axle and the sprocket, those wouldn't fit in my tumbler or polisher. The rest of the smaller hardware, I did run through the tumbler for 24 to 36 hours, and you can see how they came out. The brake rod, the axles, and the sprocket, I had to hand polish with quadruple aught steel wool. That's 4 zeros. That's a very, very fine steel wool, and I just hand polished those and cleaned them up, and then I washed everything in acetone, clean acetone, when I was done. There might be a few pieces that are not here that I've already started to put back together in different assemblies, such as for the controls, the switches on the controls. There's some small hardware in there, some springs and some screws that are not available separately, so I did clean those up and replated and polished those too. So they're not in this shot, along with perhaps a few other pieces, but this is the majority of the specialty hardware that I've replated. I think I'm about done with replating right now for this project, and we're moving on now to starting to reassemble. I'm going to talk now about the rectifier. This is the original that came out of the bike, of course. I'm not sure why I removed the plug there, but clearly I did. It did have a plug on it. I don't remember. That was a couple of weeks ago. I pulled that off. But nonetheless, I did test it using the specifications provided in the service manuals. I checked with both of them, and it failed the test procedure, so it's going to be replaced. Now, you can buy modern replacements for this that are more of a solid state. They're much smaller, they're more like a wafer. that would replace this certainly without a problem once you figured out how to connect it. But I chose not to pursue a more modern route. I want something that looked like the original. So what I came up with, or what I found, was this. And this part I got from, I think it was out of Malaysia or Indonesia, one or the other. And it's aftermarket, certainly. Here's the bag it came in, right there. And I found this humorous. It says genuine part. I suppose that is a genuine part, all right. I don't think it's genuine in terms of being Honda. I think it's an aftermarket part, but it's a very, very close facsimile to the original. I did not test this, by the way, not yet. I might before it's over. But it does, in appearance anyway, match the original. The connector that came on it had this locking tab here, and with this black protective sleeve. So I took those two off and put on gray silver sleeving that matches the original Honda, which is what the original Rectifier had. And then I replaced this plug with this one out of my inventory that matches the plug on the opposite end of the wire harness where these will match up. Now this plug would have worked. I just didn't like this tab on here, so I just replaced these two pieces with these. The other thing I wanted to mention is you'll notice that this mounting stem here is a little longer. I think you can see that there than the original. And this has a flat spot on one side right there. Probably see that as well here. That flat spot on this one is not oriented the same way that this one is, so I might have to, when I mount it on the air cleaner housing, and that's where this mounts. It hangs off the side of the air cleaner, the housing for the air cleaner, air filter. I might have to loosen this up and rotate that key, that notch there, which lines up with the bracket, make sure this is positioned correctly. And whether that's too long or not, you can see again the length is a little bit longer. I might have to cut this off. I don't know yet, but we'll determine that when we go to install it on the bike. And that's how it looks at another time. Here you can see the new tires I recently bought for the SL125. The process of buying new tires was really driven by the rear tire. That is the size of the rear tire. That's a 325. Originally it was a 325 by 18. The front tire is a 275 by 21. Those are much more available currently than the 325 width. The process is a little involved. What I discovered is that new tires that have a trials or universal tread pattern that would reasonably match the original tire on this bike in that width, that 325 width, are not readily available. Now, what I discovered also is that many sites, eBay as well as business sites, websites, do list the tire as available, but when you go to order one, they're out of stock. Now, I don't know if that's driven by the recent economic challenges around the world or the pandemic everyone's been dealing with in the interruption supply chain, but I did not find one site of any brand of tire that had that size, that 325 width, available, or rather on hand, I should say. And you could find used tires on eBay that take offs from originally on the bike for ridiculous money. It was very common to see a used tire or used tires, either front or rear, for this bike. Virtually wore out, cracked. The tread was pretty much gone. In some cases even damaged with chunks out of the rubber. They're asking often $100 US or more, which I thought was just ludicrous. This particular brand of tire is VEE, and it's made in Thailand. And they do have, or they actually market this as an original style tread, vintage tread, trials tread, and I zeroed in on that pretty quickly because I like the look of the tire, but again, I couldn't find any. So what I did ultimately is I put a search in on eBay, 325 by 18. I didn't really care about the brand and just left it out there. And within about a week or so, coincidentally, I just happened to check my email and I'd gotten a notice from eBay that this tire had just been posted as online with Buy Now. It was reasonably inexpensive. I think it was $69 with free shipping, $69 US with free shipping, which I didn't think was bad for a brand new tire. So I immediately bought it, probably within 15-20 minutes of that tire being posted on eBay. I have no idea how many they had on inventory. I wasn't taking a chance. I just went ahead and bought it. And I had it, it was delivered within 3, 4, 5 business days. The front tire is much more readily available in that 275/21 size of various brands. But since I wanted the two tires to match, I went ahead and bought or ordered the same tire, the equivalent tire, same model number, same tread pattern, just the different size to match the front rim, so that I had a matching set of tires. I've also ordered new tubes, which I do not have yet as of this recording. I expect I'll have them here in the next couple of business days to go with these tires. So let's take a little bit of an up-close look at the tires themselves. I thought it'd be just a little easier just to hold the tire up here in front of the camera, not reset up at the bench. But you can see there it's a 325 by 18 VRM021 is the, I guess it's a model number. You can see the size right there. And I think you can see the tread pattern. This is a very, very close match to the original tread pattern. This is, of course, not the original tire used on this bike, but you can see it's called a Super Trail Star right there. And these were made about the same time. Looking at the date code on tire, I think they were made around May. If my math was right, they were made around May of 2020. So that's, as I'm making this video, that's about 6 months ago. So these are fresh tires. And the other tire, the front tire, is exactly the same model. It's just a different size.